Karina.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm just. Oh, you probably now you can probably hear me better. Thoroughly amazed that we were able to get back on time.
Yes. Yeah, that was good. Okay, I have now made you a co-host, so you should have the ability to promote people now.
Great. And let's see. And you're recording?
Yes, it's recording.
Excellent. And I have to pull up my Google Doc. Hi, Phil.
Hello.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Ann. Hi, Phil. Nice, cozy little group.
We have a few more people joining us.
No, I think it's just us three, Ann.
Oh, we'll get a lot done then, won't we?
Yeah.
We'll go real fast.
That's good. I don't know. We could talk about this stuff for hours and we only have 40 minutes really.
Mhm.
Be fine. We'll just.
Well, in one way or another, we'll be talking about this for the next 2 to 3 years. So
Yeah, it's true.
this isn't the only time, but hopefully it's a good kickoff, or more than a kickoff.
Right. So Mike, you're going to help us keep on time, help Karina and I.
Oh, am I? Okay.
Yeah, that's your job.
What? Okay, give me the details.
Okay, well, we're going to be starting discussion here at 4:40 in 2 minutes, and we should be done with our first question at 5 o'clock, and our second question at 5:20, and our third question at 5:25. I'll watch it too, but
Okay, I can do that.
Okay, I have a cheat sheet.
Okay.
See, right here.
Yeah, now I do too. So.
We're supposed to be seeing Eduardo and Dwight and Fabian and John Gardner and Sharon Smith, though 5 minutes is not a big break. So if people needed one, we will see them slide in right at 5:39 and 30
Right.
seconds.
Well, we still have 2 minutes.
Right, exactly. It looks like Tony's joining us from ODOT.
Are there any particular materials that we should sort of have at our disposal?
Oh, I'm going to share. And in fact, I'll just go ahead and share right now. Okay. Can you see a document that says question 1?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this will be our sort of cheat sheet, and it has the questions, and looks like John, John, can you?
That might be John Gardner.
Now that I'm sharing a screen, I have less ability to see what's happening. Hi, Sharon.
Okay, I promoted John as.
Hello. Thank you. That's all I was asking for.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, John Gardner. So thank
okay,
you
great. Welcome,
I think
John.
I clicked the wrong link. Thank you.
Okay, and we have Fabian, and we have Dwight, and we have, hey, Eduardo. Do we have Eduardo? Is the only one we're missing who's supposed to be here. I'm going to text someone. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Ann. I'm often listening in the background for those of you who, and I will also say, Penny Maybe, who has been sitting in the role that I was in earlier, has retired. And so we get a new co-facilitator, and I'm filling in at the moment. So we have 3 questions to go through today. I'm sharing a screen. Karina is going to be taking notes as we discuss, and Mike is going to help us keep on time. I will tell you that I think that the most important question for us to discuss is question 2, but we can't get to question 2 until we go through question 1. So that's what we're going to do. And really, we want this to be really, this is brainstorming. It's, you know, getting stuff on paper and not critiquing it, but getting ideas out, and so we can discuss them again later. And, you know, with the purpose of really using the I-205 experience to, you know, learn from that and then build on it as we go ahead. And I see Eduardo has joined us. Great. Thank you so much. I mean, right now we should all pat yourselves on the back for managing 2 different links. So our first question is thinking about, which should be in front of you, thinking about our, which is actually a couple of different parts. Thinking about our engagement objectives and the tools for engaging people. We want to understand from you, did we have the right objectives? And if the answer is no, what did we miss? And in there, it has what our objectives were from our I-205 engagement plan, from that process that we went through from early August through mid-October. We wanted to increase awareness about how modern toll systems work, the benefits of tolls, opportunities and constraints of the I-205 toll project, project timelines and alternatives, the results of the feasibility analysis, and ODOT's approach to equity. And then we wanted to gather input on those NEPA elements of purpose and need, goals and objectives, alternatives, evaluation criteria, and any concerns and potential impacts. So is there anything that really stood out to you from the objectives? Were these the right ones to look at and to think about as we planned our work? And don't all talk at once.
Well, maybe I'll just
Go ahead.
Start. You know, one of the things that I was wondering when earlier this afternoon when we were summarizing, you know, what some of the themes and feedback were, I was sort of wondering how, and this may get to the issue of what information, you know, the people saw before they answered or responded to the survey. But I was wondering, how was the whole concept of tolling presented? So in other words, you know, I would imagine that, you know, one of the first things I would wonder about is, well, why are we doing this in the first place? I mean, what's, you know, and I guess that gets to this goal of benefits of tolls. You know, that seems to me to be a pretty fundamental issue, is why are we even thinking about this, and what are the 2 big benefits? And I guess that is an important an important objective. Frankly, I probably would have put that right at the very top of the list as number 1, because if you don't have an understanding of what the benefits are, then almost everything else isn't going to quite fall in place.
Okay, so really elevating project benefits, project purpose.
Yeah.
Making sure that that was super clear.
Right. So for example, do people value the idea that tolling is a critical part of congestion management? Okay. Maybe people don't care about congestion, but my guess is they probably do.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Other thoughts about the objectives?
Yeah, no, I think Philip took the words out of my mouth. I'm going between an iPad and a laptop to make sure I'm reading the right things. But it is that old, or not that old, mantra, but it's sort of start with why, right? You know, and if people understand the why, they are more likely to come along for some of the other elements. And I just remember rereading the public comment stuff the other day that Christine sent out, and I there's still people that are coming at the project without really either recognizing or at least acknowledging the why that's been communicated already. Yeah. So it's almost sort of like every time you engage, it's like, before we get started, again, here's what we're trying to accomplish, kind of a thing. So that's the only thing I was going to say, but Philip said it better.
So in terms of the objectives that we have Is it that there were too many objectives and that, getting the why in there was just kind of buried, or just we needed to elevate the why a little bit more and make sure that everything was framed around that?
I mean, I think it's a matter of elevating the why. And when I look at some of that, I mean, I don't know if I were a community member, would I care? I mean, maybe I would, but would I care about what ODOT's approach to equity is? I mean, not from a conceptual perspective. My guess is that I would care less about the general approach to equity, which is sort of an intellectual issue that's important to ODOT. But as an individual and as a community member, I'm probably more concerned about what's the impact on me and what's my particular role. And if I understand the why, then I can answer that question better.
Any other
Yeah.
thoughts? Go before we move on.
No,
Sharon. Oh, sorry. And then John.
Great, thanks. I think maybe we tried to do too much in this initial phase, because one of the things that we heard was it was hard to get people to stay engaged, and they
Yeah.
left the website, and it's probably way too early for us to understand, get information on project timelines and alternatives
Yeah.
and value pricing, and we don't even know that stuff yet. So
Yeah.
it seems like what we ought to be doing is finding, as you all mentioned, why are we doing it? What is it going to look like? And what are your thoughts? What are your questions
Yeah.
and concerns, rather
Yeah.
than trying to get too much into the weeds when we don't even know
Yeah.
what the weeds look like yet.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of these objectives are very appropriate for transportation nerds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Well, and I think, this is Dwight, I think we maybe don't give people a benefit enough for being able to understand some of this stuff. But I think the why certainly explains other things. If you just think about life in general, you're trying to solve a problem, when the police try to solve a crime, the thing that they try to answer first is the why. And I think that's very important. I think also explaining the alternatives in the true sense, and not try to scare people. What are the alternatives if we do this, or if we do nothing? What happens? Does the world implode and the road just crumbles? I guess some people would want to try to convince people of that, but I think we need to be real with people, and that's part of the, I keep hearing transparency. I think that's part of it. Is the alternative, if we do nothing, that we continue to have congestion, and it's even a tougher sell now that we're in the pandemic. There is no traffic on the 205 or the I-5. I'm loving it. I'm driving. I'm doing as we call donuts all the way down the interstate because there's nobody else out there. So I think the why is good, but I also think just being transparent. What happens if we don't do anything? And if we can't come up with, something that really is meaningful to people, then it's going to be a tough sell. It really is. It really is.
I'm going to move us on because just because this is, we have a couple of things within this question one. Did we identify the right voices? And if the answer is no, who did we miss? Or what did we miss? And the list that you should be seeing is the list that we had in our plan of who we identified at the beginning, of who we were trying to reach: general public, commuters, nearby residents, our committees, of which you are members, underrepresented, underserved, elected officials, businesses, statewide interests, freight policymakers, and city and agency partners.
So
Is
one
there anybody we
question,
missed?
one,
Yes.
one question is if those are particular target audiences, did we actually identify who in the respondents were members of these audiences?
In some way, yes. Not all of them. And I'll try and be facilitator and not answerer.
Yeah.
But I think this was the plan. And I think one of the things we've heard from this group is that earlier in thinking about who is missing, we have heard from you previously that we should be considering folks with who are living with a disability. And you'll see that they weren't specifically mentioned. So that was one of them.
Okay.
Now, whether we, would be later, did we reach everyone?
Yeah.
This is the question on, did we identify the right folks?
Got it.
So I just wanted to make a quick point on the last one.
Sure.
It seems like throughout the report, people just wanted to know where the revenue was going. And so just clearly spelling that out, because it's people's pockets is where, where the interest is. And then on the question that we're currently on, I joined the committee to bring the voice of bi-state commuters. And I don't know how many people travel through the Abernathy Bridge coming from Clark County. But especially when we start talking about I-5, we start to see more of those folks as they head down into those cities along the corridor. So bi-state commuters, I would like to see spelled out.
Great, thank you. Anybody else that we missed and we want to include here as we move ahead with our engagement?
So this is John, when I see the list, when I see policymakers, would that be include like activists or environmental community partners or stakeholders, or that's a pretty broad?
It is pretty broad. I think it's more, I think you could lump them easily with city and agency partners or statewide folks. I would put them as folks who make their living, or very involved. But you could interpret it in any way. You could say, hey, that needs to be more clear.
That would be my recommendation, only because if you start thinking about the big, the groups that are most active around these kind of conversations, the activist community, both the environmental justice, I feel like they deserve a call out only because they, their research in this. So.
Okay,
yeah, I would agree. I think, on the surface of it, it might be hard to tell the difference between elected officials and policymakers, because I tend to sort of consider those almost to be synonymous terms, as opposed to advocacy groups, and people like that who have an interest in policy, but they are not policy makers.
Okay, that certainly. Other thoughts about?
Yeah, I agree with everything that has been said. This is Fabian, and I just want to add that I think that, and I'm sure we might touch on it later on, but I think that we have kind of identified the right voices, but I think right now it's more also the sense of like, we are missing some, not far from our own, because of COVID, where we do everything virtually, maybe sending mailers to those folks who could be more affected by in those areas would be another way to outreach.
Great. Thank you.
And in the spirit of doing my job, we have 5
Mike.
minutes to go until we switch it up. So if there's more to part one.
There is.
Okay.
And Fabian, thank you, because you just mentioned tools like a mailer. Did we use the right tools to reach our audiences? And if the answer is no, what did we miss? And Fabian, I just heard mailers as some way of, more as another way, especially in the COVID environment, of reaching people.
Yes, and I also want to add that I think something that was useful, because I gave a couple presentations in Spanish and with other community organizations like Causa and Latino Network. And something that did work was the videos that were made, and that kind of helps also with people who may learn things differently. Visuals often help, and that was something that I used before beginning a presentation to explain the why and how it's gonna also reduce stress in drivers when there's a lot of traffic. So I think having more of those and maybe even making them concise and having them as ads could also be helpful.
Great, thank you. Sharon.
I'm wondering, and I don't know how to solve this, but we do have a segment of our population who don't have reliable access to Wi-Fi and internet. And how are we reaching them? I mean, mailers is one way to do it. You know, in the good old days, we could do door to door. And I know here in Bend, what we've had success is setting up information stations in front of a grocery store that, you know, certain populations frequent. And there's a lot you're able to get to folks, but we can't really do that now, but we should put that on the list for when we can.
Yeah.
And to me, I heard really strongly that people want to see a video. And so we need to be, if we want to get our why message across and we want to explain it and show how the tools work, short, punchy videos that you could even show in front of a grocery store to people who don't otherwise have access to the internet might be helpful.
Thank you. We got 3 minutes before we move on to question 2. Is there anything that we've missed in this 3-part question 1?
I was just going to add to this last part.
Yeah, Eduardo.
Just on the topic of the open house, it was pretty text heavy and the questions were lengthy. So I just echo the concerns that the community had. And then additional tools, one tool that I use frequently in my engagement in Tigard is visiting minority-owned, women-owned businesses where bulletin boards are still very popular. So I could see success in sending these community engagement liaisons to drop flyers, and again, reaching that audience that is not connected on the web. Yeah, and I would agree with Fabian. The Facebook Live, especially with communities of color, is real successful.
Great, thank you.
Well, you know, one of the things, and this might be really expensive, but, you know, in political campaigns, when there are essentially paid television advertisement, I wonder if there are, you know, very brief message spots that can be, you know, posted on that kind of media.
Yeah. And sometimes we call that earned media.
Earned media, or whatever it is.
We get it for free.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there was some kind of partnership too with like TriMet and CTRAN. You know, these people might not be paying the toll specifically, but especially among communities of color, word of mouth is real important. So if someone sees something on their transit ride, they might communicate that with a coworker or somebody else that drives. So word of mouth, really important.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, Karina, who's taking notes for us. A virtual flip chart. Okay, we're moving on to question 2. So the important question, because this leads to trying to make sure that we're able to get to our process equity and looking at, do we have the right indicators to measure success? And if not, how do we measure engagement, ensure we have equitable processes that lead to equitable outcomes? You know, what we're talking about here is more about process equity, but we can't get to outcome equity unless we have process equity. They're completely linked. What's on the screen is what we included in our engagement plan up to about halfway down. And then and I've just put a cursor there if you can see it. The ones below that are some additional ones that were included in our broader public involvement plan and not specific to I-205. But they are available for your review as well. So the question is, did we have the right ones? Or are there are there too many? Are there just completely different ones that are needed? Are we headed in the right direction, or should we just edit them in some way?
And for clarification, greater than 75% of participants that's repeated twice. Is there one?
Yeah. One is about the quality and accessibility of the information presented. So going back to the comment we just had about the online open house being pretty text heavy,
Yeah.
or not being able to answer questions, that would be related to the information presented. And the second one is greater than 75% of participants express satisfaction with the quality and accessibility of the information presented.
Well, I see that twice.
Oh, sorry. The next one, it's supposed to be greater than 75% of participants express satisfaction with their opportunity to be heard.
Okay.
So sorry, yes, that is it. There are two that have that same metric, but one's about information presented and one is about the opportunity to be heard.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, Mike, if you want to just weigh in here on the difference between what we're hearing now in this phase versus the feasibility analysis.
Well, I was thinking about that in light of some of the comments earlier about explaining why we're doing this. I do think during the value pricing feasibility analysis, it was much easier to tell the story because congestion at the time in 2017 and 2018 was really peaking. Obviously, we're in the situation where it's not, and everybody's enjoying their drive around Portland because there's 10% less traffic. Although I will say at peak hours it's back
still
to normal.
bad.
Yeah, it's back to normal. So but see that's actually a great way to explain the benefits of tolling, because we're only looking to manage like 5 to 10% of the traffic. You get that off and you're going to get a much better drive, more efficient, more timely. You can count on it. So anyway, that's just an aside. So in some ways, our job back then was a little easier. The challenge in this one, and you guys have all hit on it, too much information, too specific in a lot of sense. We did need to do this for our NEPA process. We had to get out there and get the purpose and need and the early alternative options in front of the public, because it's just part of the process. We have to do that. Maybe we didn't do, in many ways, it wasn't as good as it could have been. But that was the challenge in front of us. And I love the ideas that I'm hearing tonight, videos and the targeted outreach, just everything. So I don't know, Anne, if that's what you asked me to do. I probably went off on a tangent, but.
Well, we'll circle back around and just be, are these the right metrics? I mean, if you were thinking about how would you know if you were successful? Are these the things you would use, or would you use something else?
Well, one thing about quality and accessibility of information presented, I mean, you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So, if you don't present certain kinds of information and the participant doesn't know that information, then what does it mean when they say, I got the right information or I didn't get the right information? So in other words, I think it should be more about understanding. So if you said something like 75% of participants expressed satisfaction or expressed understanding of the benefits of tolling or something along those lines, then if they said, no, I really don't understand, or I don't quite get it, or something like that, then that is a direct avenue to saying we didn't give them the right information.
So more about understanding rather than satisfaction, because they don't know.
I mean, because whatever information they get, they may be satisfied with it, but it may be totally inaccurate or totally inadequate.
Okay. Other thoughts about measuring success and knowing, saying, yep, if I know this, I know we're being successful.
So I guess the question I have is, the first one says number of comments received similar to or greater than earlier phases.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think of this kind of stuff, I think of like, what is a relative share, right? So I'm curious if you guys had a soft outreach goal or a soft survey goal. And, that's how I would have done it, would have been, well, given the restrictions we have, we want to get 5,000 responses, or, you know what I mean? Or by county or by GS, and I don't know if there was a zip code or something on it, but that would be a big thing for me to say, do we feel that that was representative from a population standpoint along the corridor or something like that?
So more about representative of the population. Our soft goal was 2,000 and we got 4,600.
Okay.
But making it proportional to the population.
Or even the commute. Yeah, I mean, I guess since it just feels like, I completely understand how hard it is to do outreach and get people to respond,
Right.
but it's such a big issue, at least when people finally raise their head and engage. So. Yeah.
Okay.
And did you have some kind of measure, like a ratio of if we reach X amount of people that a certain percentage are actually responding to the survey? How did you measure that? I don't know if that makes sense the way that I stated it.
So we had self-identified demographic data, and we did look at that to see if it was proportional to the demographics of the region. And in many cases it was, but with people who identify as Hispanic or from Latin America, we were underrepresented there. And then we also looked at proportional, we looked at counties based on self-reported zip code, and most people who responded were near the project area, which actually you probably want. They're the most affected by it. Does that answer your question? we have a lot of data. I'll have to tell you that.
If like, let's say if 100 people were reached by this Facebook ad, how many of those actually completed the survey?
We did look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we reached a lot of people via the video and on Facebook, but not too many actually completed the survey if they got to it via the online open house. Facebook was quite effective. About 500 people started the survey via Facebook or completed it via Facebook of the 4,000. And I'll stop there because I'll never end.
Thank you.
Can I throw one out there? Just
Sure.
to see what the committee members think. In the spirit of brainstorming, so don't criticize me too much. But would an indicator be if we asked the people who responded, did the survey and the information you saw cause you to talk to a friend or a family member or somebody else about the project? Did it try to get at that? Did it encourage you to then go and reach out to somebody else because it's an interesting issue or an important issue or a good survey or something that you think is important? So I don't know. I just thought if a survey encourages people to then reach out and spread it around to others, that might be an indicator that it was a successful one versus an unsuccessful one.
Oh, I'm interested to hear if any of the folks, as I know, I'm looking at faces here and names, and I know all of you have had the challenge of trying to figure out success and getting engagement. So what do you think of Mike's question? Sharon likes it. Others? Dwight looks like he's thinking strongly.
I mean, I think that's a good idea. And in fact, I think in a lot of cases, surveys actually even prompt the survey taker to get more information. So in other words, it's both a self-prompt, but it could also be a prompt to engage others. So I do think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've taken surveys recently that asked, was this survey helpful? So.
Okay,
yes.
great. Are there any of these that are on here that you think are super helpful to keep? Or any that are just like, you shouldn't use that. You can get the information, but it's really not helpful.
So traditional and factual media coverage. Maybe you've already sort of articulated the difference there.
This is a little bit of a summary. I saw that when I was pulling up this document, and even I can't really determine what it is. So clearly there's needs to be some clarification there, because it seems like two different things, but I think traditional is more, like the Oregonian, the network TV news, the, Oregon Public Broadcasting, KXL, and factual, of course, you would just want it, based in reality.
And of course, Oregonian isn't a factual.
Oh, the Oregonian. Did I just mention?
No, but since, yeah.
So clarifying that one, I think
yeah.
would be helpful.
Yeah, and of course, how important that is.
But. Okay. So that is that, media coverage would be something that's useful.
Yeah.
But just clarify the metric.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought a lot of these were good. One that we participated in was the regional partners provide opportunities for project briefings to facilitate dialogue and partner input. You guys had some folks that came to one of our community meetings and used that forum to spread the opportunity. So I think that's a really good metric to get the word out and hopefully helped with the bottom line of responses.
I hope so too. That one was a little bit harder to connect, but
yeah,
yes, I know that that one was seen as, that presentation was seen as quite useful.
So on agency partner staff review, discuss and share, explain that one a little bit more. Is that like reaching out to some stakeholder organization?
It was more about government agencies.
Oh, government, okay.
Yeah, so like TriMet, so
okay.
Or the city of Oregon City, and there were 27 different briefings that were done throughout the course of the comment period to share information and encourage those different government entities within the project area to post information online, share it with their networks, which they did.
Okay. I mean, maybe that could be clarified, because that's, I mean, if that's within sort of the, public jurisdiction, that's one thing. If it's actually reaching out to other non-public jurisdiction agencies or organizations, that's something different.
Okay. So including these metrics related to public jurisdictions and partners is good. We need the clear language. I mean, there were two things there. One was that we got our jurisdictional partners to comment, which they did, but then also to facilitate the engagement of folks that they connect with, their constituents, their members.
And then regional partners, how is that different?
This is why we need you. You put these things together and you think they're internal documents, and then, then it's like not very clear. So we need to be more clear, I think, with exactly, are they public jurisdictions or are they like advocacy organizations?
Yeah, because I would think reaching out to what I would call stakeholder groups would be important and potentially helpful. Hard to tell if that's somewhere in here.
Thank you. How are we doing on time?
5 minutes. I was just gonna jump in, and
we have 5 minutes.
5:15. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great. Are there other things we want to dive into here related to the indicators of success, or even on question 1? I felt like we moved you along because I thought we would get stuck on question 2, but maybe we need to go back to question 1.
There isn't a question 3?
There is a question 3.
Oh, there isn't. Okay.
There is a question 3, but we allocated less time for it. So I just wanted to make sure that we had exhausted question 1 and question 2 before we went on to that.
Can we go back up to question 1?
Sure. And then remember, this was the 3-part one. So it's the tools. Did we have the right tools to reach our audiences? And you guys provided some good ideas there that Karina has captured. And we also had, did we identify the right voices? And some clarity was definitely needed there. And then also, were our objectives the right ones? And did we miss anything? I think what we have heard is that explaining the why is super important, and that don't try to do too much at once. You want me to move on to question 3, or we have things we want to talk about? Move on. We'll move on to question.
Go back to the groups, the right voices.
Right
Let's see.
Yeah, here we go. I don't see, and I never asked, is this big enough for you all? Sometimes I have to ask that. You can.
Statewide interests.
It could be bigger.
It could be. See, I knew I should have asked that. There.
Are statewide interests stakeholder groups?
Could be both. Elected officials, for instance, other area commissions on transportation. There was a presentation given to Region 5, but freight interests are definitely more of a statewide, but elected officials, I think, was how it was considered.
I mean, elected officials and freight are already listed.
They're already listed there.
So statewide interest, if it's a third bucket, I'm just wondering what else would go into that. But having said that, I think stakeholder groups like advocacy organizations should be called out.
Okay.
And they may or may not be part of policymakers.
Yes. We're getting that down. That was a good addition. Good clarification. You're cracking me up, Karina, with your University of Oregon there. It says anonymous duck when we see you typing.
That's funny. I didn't realize that.
That's all right. We all recognize the native bird. Okay, well, let's move on to just question.
Okay.
We can come back if we have more time, but question 3, and I have heard Fabian and talk about this already, and John. In part of your charge, in your purpose, it says the committee will support the implementation of the equitable engagement plan by hosting or co-hosting meetings, events, and/or activities as determined by the engagement plan. So our question is, how can you support future engagement? And it may just be doing the same things you have been doing, or now as you're starting to hear what we have done, how could you help in the future?
Hmm.
And things to think about are, do you have connections with any of the audiences? Do you have access or connections to any of the tools that we identified?
Yeah, I think, continuing, and this is Fabian again, continuing more of the virtual events. And I don't know, we could do like webinars in different languages as well. And I think also for those who may not have access to Wi-Fi, I think, going to specific radio stations could be another method.
And is that something you've done in the past, Fabian?
Yes, these are things that I've done in the past for other issues. And then I think that, this is another, this tolling project is something else we can bring up to these other folks. And I do think that also just including more convincing evidence of why it's important. I think it's helpful because we do have, we're going to have a lot of questions on transparency and like, where is the revenue going? And I think that if we can remind people why they can trust this project, I think it's going to get more people who are opposing it now to flip and support it.
Thank you so much.
organize a OPB Think Out Loud segment.
Mhm.
In fact, there was just one, I think, Monday or Tuesday on STIP funding.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that, but obviously later on, there could be an interesting conversation about tolling and and congestion relief. And I'm sure myself and a couple of others on the committee would be happy to be participants and engage in a debate.
Thank you. Fabian, I think, or maybe it was Eduardo, you talked about Facebook Live. Is that things you've done before? And I just wanted to see if that's something we should add to that, to the list.
Well, I definitely mentioned Facebook Live specifically, but Fabian mentioned it. Is that something that he does with his organization?
Okay.
And for the city of Tigard, I host a program as well that actually I interviewed Fabian for. And we are able to do a transmission of just audio. So, you know, it's not necessarily video that has to happen. And then that content can be shared on YouTube, or so then that link can be spread out more broadly, even to people who don't have a Facebook account. So that's how we have connected with a broader audience at the city of Tigard.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, and to answer your question, I did do a couple of Facebook Lives and presentations on the tolling projects, and that has brought in a lot of engagement. I don't know how many people go into and also fill out the survey, but definitely people do listen, and some folks comment as well in the comments of like what their thoughts are. So yeah, that's something that we've been doing now since pandemic started.
Great, thank you. I think we have
2 minutes.
2 minutes
2 minutes.
for wrap up.
Yep.
Are there things that, you know, based on this conversation that have really resonated with you that we're going to be doing a report out and here, and want to make sure that I'm carrying forward some of the things that, as you've looked at all the materials and heard, that the rest of the group should hear? Sharon.
I really think that we need to create a couple of very good, short, punchy videos explaining kind of the benefits of tolling and how it works, and what the why. Because we're trying to accomplish a whole lot, but if we could just accomplish those things,
Yeah.
I think we would really be well ahead.
Agree.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Anything other big things that we want to make sure that we share with the rest of the committee?
I bet you they'll come up with the same list.
Often happens.
Yeah.
All righty.
And did we do a video during the value pricing feasibility analysis? I can't recall.
We did.
Yeah.
We did one, and actually then we modified it, and we used some of that same footage for the one we did for this one.
Yeah.
We can share what we have. I think the difference between what we did and the suggestion that's being made is punchy.
And focus, maybe a few of them, right? A few of them for different circumstances. Yeah.
Unfortunately, in today's day and age, you have to compete with TikTok and everything else. So it's you got to make it, you know, entertaining as well as informative.
Well,
That's
I'm
the reality.
You know, hire some high school students.
I know. I know that we have talked with Lucinda about the need for her to have a TikTok account and to start. She's not really bitten yet, though. All righty. Well, we will now go back into the main webinar. So good luck. So far, so good. Congratulations on getting to this point. And we'll see you in the main group in here in just a second.
So we don't have a break, correct?
We don't have a break. We're just going,
We're going
straight
directly.
back.
Okay.
We're going straight back.
Thanks on behalf of
Thank you.
ODOT to everybody. Thank you. It's great.
Thank you, Karina.
Yeah, of course.